Let's create a custom block entity in Minecraft. Forging Fabric courses with advanced topics such as entities, custom structures, and 3D armor models linked in the description below. Alright, we find ourselves back in IntelliJ once more, and in this tutorial we're going to be adding a custom block entity. So adding to our custom block model, so the gem cutting station, we're now going to add the block entity to it. This tutorial is sort of split into two parts. In this part, we're going to do all of the, basic work. We're going to add the actual block entity, we're going to add the menu, we're going to add the screen, and then in the next tutorial, we're going to add some more robust functionality, let's say, with a custom recipe type, so that we can read in recipes via JSON files. So we will actually add a completely functional block entity in this tutorial. However, we're going to hard code a lot of stuff, and usually that is not quite what you want, but I basically want to show this, in two separate tutorials, so keep that in mind. The first thing we'll do is in the block package, we're going to right click new package called entity. And inside of there, we're going to create two new classes. One of them is the mod block entities class, and the other one will actually go into another package called custom, and that's going to be the gem cutting station block entity. Quite the mouthful, but that's going to be fine. Right, this will extend the block entity class, and it will also implement the menu provider. So there you go. Those are the two things that we need, and then hover over this, implement methods, and then hover over this create constructor matching super. Right, so many times I will be copying over quite a lot of the code, so everything here is available to you in the description below. GitHub repository and individual gist as well. Let's actually add some stuff that we can add like this. So this is going to be a new text component, and this is going to be the gem cutting station. So this is just the name that is going to be displayed inside of the GUI itself. So that is why we need this. And then we need two things for the actual inventory. So this is very important. We're going to need a private final item stack handler called item handler. And this is equal to a new item stack handler with size 4. And then we need the curly brackets to basically make a anonymous class out of this, because what we want to do is we want to say on contents changed. We want to set changed, call this one right here. So this is extremely important because otherwise some things are not going to function properly. We also need a private lazy optional in the angled brackets of item handler called the lazy item handler, and this will be equal to lazy optional.empty. Right, what is very important is that this 4 right here, if you have a different number of slots in your inventory, then you of course need to change this. So in this inventory, in this GUI, we're going to have 4 slots in our machine, therefore we have a 4 here. Very important, keep this in mind. Right, then next we're going to just copy over a few methods that we're going to need. This is going to be everything from the get capability method all the way down to the drops method right here. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we should not get any errors here. There you go. And that is the case. So it's very important here. You can see the onload method. This is actually where we're assigning the lazy item handler right here that, we're putting in empty right here, but then we're basically making a lazy optional of the actual item handler. And this is important for the get capabilities. As a general overview, the get capability method just makes it so that, for example, other mods can interact with your custom block entity in a way that is, basically compatible. So the capability here in this case is going to be an item handler capability. So you could, for example, pump in certain items or pump out certain items with this item handler capability. We're not going to go into too much detail on this, but that is the general idea. Of course, also we need the save additional and the load method here because we want our inventory to be properly saved, of course. So this is needed for when, exiting the world and then entering back into it, that everything here works fine. The drops right here is just going to basically drop all of the contents into the world, and we're going to be calling this via the block actually when we destroy the block, but that's going to be in just a little bit. Then what's also very important is that this null right here in the create menu method, we actually want to purposefully make an error so that we don't forget to set this a little bit later, because making the container menu, we're actually going to have to do a lot of other stuff before we do this, and we can basically create this here, so keep that in mind as well. That is usually how I do it. What we want to change as well is right here in the constructor, we want to get rid of the type right here. Then of course we will get an error right here, but this will be fixed when we now add the block entity to our mod block entities class. So the mod block entities class is going to look very similar to what we've pretty much seen a few times now. with a deferred register, this time of block entity type here, and then in the angle brackets a question mark. This is going to be the block underscore entities, and this is equal to the deferred register.create forge registries dot block entities tutorial mod.mod id. And then, of course, where there is a deferred register, there also is a public static void register method with an event bus called event bus. And then we're just calling block entities.register and passing in the event bus. Let's immediately call this method as well. So let's just put it right here, mod block entities.register, and then passing in the event bus. There you go. And now we can register our custom block entity. So this is going to be a public static final registry object of type block entity type of type gem cutting station block entity. This is, of course, the gem cutting station entity or block entity. I mean, either way, it's going to work. It is a very long name, as you can see. Let's do block entity. That's fine. And that's equal to block entities.register gem underscore cutting underscore station underscore block underscore entity, comma, and then a supplier. So open and close parentheses, and then the arrow here for block entity type dot builder dot of. Then we're passing in the gem cutting station. You can see it's already suggesting it, colon colon new. Then after the new, comma, mod blocks dot gem cutting station dot get after the parentheses right here, so not the get parentheses but the first parentheses here, dot build, and then passing in null, and then two parentheses, closing parentheses, and then at the end a semicolon. There you go. But of course all of the code is also available, so you don't have to necessarily type this out. You can also copy stuff over, and that is the actual gem cutting station entity registered. Now what we can do instead of this type here, we can say mod block entities gem cutting station dot get, and that will then fix this error as well, and that should be all that we need to do right here. So now we're going to need to actually change the block itself. So like I said, we're going to ignore this error for the time being, and we're going to go into the block and actually change this. So gem cutting station block. And here we're actually going to need to do quite a few things, actually. First thing we're going to change is the actual class that it extends. So this is going to be base entity block right here instead of block. And then let's hover over this, implement methods. You can see the new block entity has to be overridden right here. And what I will actually do is I will actually copy over all of the methods that we're going to need. This is the get render shape, on remove, use, new block entity, and the get ticker method. So let's actually do that as well. There you go. In theory, we should only get one error at the very bottom here for the tick. The rest should be fine. And what is very important, let's just go through the methods here. The get render shape method is very important that you add this, because if you don't add this, then your block is going to be invisible. So keep in mind to add this definitely. The on remove method is called when you destroy this block. And you can see we're calling the drops method right here so that everything drops as well. The use method is just the method when you right click this block, and you can see we're basically just opening the container if it contains something. So you can see network hooks open GUI for this particular entity in this case. That is pretty much all that we're doing here. Here we're just creating a new gem cutting station block entity. Should be fairly self-explanatory. And then at the very bottom here, the get ticker method. What we're actually doing, let's actually format this a little bit differently. We're actually looking for a tick method, a static tick method in the block entity class, which we've not added yet. We're going to add this in just a moment. And this is basically responsible for, well, this particular block entity ticking. So the tick, probably you know this at this point, is that a tick is called 20 times every second. So 20 times every second you have a tick. And with that, we can basically do things. So in our block entity class, what we're going to do is we're going to copy over all of the static methods. This is the tick method, the craft item method, the has recipe method, and the has not reached stack limit method as well. Right, so let's just add those at the very bottom here. There you go. And we should once again, actually we will get one error, but that's going to be fine. We'll fix that in just a moment. And then what we'll have is basically the tick method. You can see in theory we could do all of the things in the tick method, but I've refactored it in such a way that it is a little bit easier to read. So you can basically see, okay, if the block entity has a recipe and we've not reached the stack limit here, then we'll craft the item. Let's just take a look at the stack limit first. We're basically checking whether or not in the slot with index 3 that the count is actually smaller than the max stack size. And if that is the case and we have a recipe, having a recipe just says that in the first water slot, basically we're having a water potion in there, or just a bottle of water. In the slot with index 1 we have raw citrine, and then in the slot with index 2 we have a gem cutter tool. Now this is a item we've actually not added yet, but we're going to add that in just a moment. All three booleans chain together with an AND, so all three have to be true, and then we will craft the item, which is just extracting from the 0 slot, the first slot, and then it's going to hurt the gem cutter tools as well. It will then also set the stack in slot 3, so this is the index 3, once again the result slot. It's going to make a new citrine item stack and just add 1 to it. So basically, if we have 0 in there, of course, it's just going to be 1 citrine. If we have 16 citrine in there, then it's going to be 17 after it is crafted. That's the general idea, and this is going to happen once every tick. So in theory, it would craft 20 items per second, and this is why I said, this is a workable solution, but in the next tutorial, we're going to see a solution with, actually, we're going to read in the different recipes, and then what we're also going to do is we're also going to be able to have a progress bar being displayed. But that is pretty much it for this. Let's actually add the item here. This is not strictly necessary for any type of block entity. This is just something that I want to do for my block entity in this case. So this is going to be the gem cutter tools, and then same here, of course, as well, gem underscore cutter underscore tools. It's a normal item, and this actually, while it does stack to 1 only, I actually want the durability to be set, let's say 32. So we can basically craft with 1 gem cutter tools 32 different, gems in this case. Let's add the JSON files for this as well. This is just, like I said, another item that we're going to need. We don't necessarily need to add something like this, but I just found it to be interesting nonetheless. So let's just do that as well. And then the actual gem cutter tools items model here, nothing too crazy, normal item model, and also just a normal item texture as well. There you go. Now this is added as well, and then we should not get that error anymore. So let's just see. This is the gem cutter. Oh, I actually named it tools. This should be tool. Should be tool. There you go. And then let's actually take a look. Did I say tools here as well? Yes, I did. Gem cutter tool. There you go. Right, and now this should be fine as well. And now everything here should be working. Now it is off to the actual menu. So while the block entity has a lot of the functionality to it, the GUI and some other functionality is being done with a menu and a screen. So what we're going to do is in the tutorial mod package, we're going to right click a new package called screen, and inside of there we're going to need a few things. First and foremost, another package called slot, and that is going to be fine. And then we're going to need 3 different classes in the screen package. That's going to be the gem cutting station menu. It's going to be the gem cutting station screen, and then also the mod menu types class. There you go. And then in the slot package, we're just going to make a new mod result slot class right here. And we're actually going to start with this. I will copy over the contents of this. They are incredibly easy to understand. So the general idea here is just that this slot, if we're using this slot, then what we're going to do is we want the player not to be able to place any item into this slot. That's literally all that there is to it, and should be fairly self-explanatory. We do need to, I believe we do need to make a result slot every time, so just like a mod result slot, because the vanilla result slots actually are for specific menus, and that is why it wouldn't work otherwise. But yeah, that's pretty much going to be fine. Next thing, let's take a look at the station menu. So let's actually close a bunch of stuff over here, and let's just look at the menu here. This is going to extend the abstract container menu right here, and then let's hover over this and implement a methods, the still valid method, and then let's hover over this again, create constructor matching super, and then we should be fine. Now, the immediate thing that we're going to do is make this constructor public. That's very important. And then also change this constructor completely. So what we want to do is we want to get rid of the first parameter here and actually do a bunch of other stuff. So the first thing that we're going to do is actually then duplicate this constructor, because we're going to have 2 constructors. So the first one is going to have exactly this, the container ID, and then an inventory called inf, and then a friendly byte buffer called extra data. The second one is actually going to have an inventory called inf and a block entity called entity. And what's going to happen is that the first constructor right here is actually not going to call super, but it's going to call this. And then passing in the container ID, the inventory, we're then going to say inventory.player.level.getBlockEntity, and then extra data.readBlockPass. That should make this constructor completely error-free, and then this constructor still will have an error right here, but no worries at all. We're going to fix that in just a moment. What we then going to need is 2 new fields, and they're both going to be private final, and then a gem cutting station block entity called block entity, and a private final level called level. There you go. Let's import this as well. Import level. This is going to be a net Minecraft world level. Very important that you choose the correct import here. And then inside of the second constructor, we're going to say check container size. This is going to be the INV and then 4. This, once again, is the size of your inventory defined in your gem cutting station block entity. If I middle mouse button click on this, you can see it. This one right here, this 4, and this 4 have to match. So this, once again, is the amount of slots that you're going to have. Then we'll say block entity is equal to entity.cast. And then we're going to cast this into a gem cutting station block entity. And there you go. Then we're also going to say this.level is equal to inv.player.level. And then what we're going to need is a few helper methods. So I will copy over basically all of the methods that we're still going to need. And that is going to be, it's going to look like a lot, but trust me, it's actually not that crazy. So first and foremost, let's actually start at the bottom before we look at this craziness, because this is something, a little of craziness there. This one right here, the add player hotbar and the add player inventory methods are just helper methods, because if you see this, it's like, what the frick is happening here? But if you say, you know, add player inventory, add player hotbar, everyone's going to be like, okay, that makes a lot of sense that we're doing this. And I just like those, you know, separating those out instead of just having the for loops in your constructor, because that just, I mean, it just is not very readable. So we can say add player inventory first and foremost, and then we're going to add the player hotbar. Also inventory, there you go. We'll need to add some more stuff here in just a second, but let's actually take a look at the other two methods. The still valid method, we've basically overridden this, and you can see it just basically always calls the still valid method with a bunch of stuff. This is pretty much boilerplate code. Just make sure that you replace the block right here with the actual block that is assigned to this particular block entity. That's very important, and then it should work totally fine. And then this method, this is pretty much the method of my worst nightmares, the quick move stack method. Luckily, this is done by D707, and they basically made this, you know, available, and you can use this. I highly recommend basically never looking at this method ever, because it is an absolute nightmare. Yes, we could spend 30 minutes going through it. I could explain to you everything that happens here, but it's absolutely not necessary. If you will have a very particular way of doing it, maybe you got to do it, but usually you should not have to do it. So basically, I always close this method. The only thing that you do need to do is right here, this 4, the T inventory slot count. Very important. This is the same number of slots that you have. So once again, this 4 is the same as this 4, is the same as this 4. So they are all the same thing. Basically, make sure that if you change one of them, you change all of them. Keep that in mind. And then the last thing that we're going to need here, we're going to also actually copy this over. That shouldn't be too crazy. So we're basically calling the get capability method on our block entity that we're passing in here, actually this block entity. In this case, if this block entity has an item handler capability, then we're going to add 4 new slots to this menu. Now, what you might ask is, wait, where did these positions come from? That's a very good question. We're going to see that in just a moment. Make sure that when you add those, your indices go up, right? 0, you start at 0, and then you count up 0, 1, 2, 3. Those indices are then basically the same as the indices in the item handler and are also responding to these ones, right? So the first slot right here, or the slot with index 0 in this case, is going to have water in it in a moment, right? And then you can see that the slot with index 3 is going to be the result slot where we actually put citrine in, and you can then clearly see this is the result slot as well, so that should make sense. Now the question is, where did the X and Y positions come from? Well, they come from the GUI. So we'll actually add the texture here. So in the textures folder, right-click, new directory called GUI, and then I'm just going to add the GUI here. So this is the gem underscore cutting underscore station underscore GUI PNG, and I will explain quickly. So, right, so let's take a look at this. The general idea is that you can see this is a 256 by 256 PNG. However, this is not 256 by 256. That's very important. A lot of people get this confused sometimes. This is actually more something like 167 by 168, something like that. And that's the normal size of a GUI. Now, where did the actual positions come from, but those are just the positions where those slots are positioned. So you can see the first one is the one where the water should be placed in, and that's at X position 34 and Y position 40. So this is going to be 34 and then 40 down, and then we're here. So this is going to be 0, 0, and then you just, in this direction, this is X, in this direction, this is Y, and then with this, you can basically check where those different slots are, and then draw, quote unquote, draw those slots in those positions. You can check this basically with any, type of image processing program, like, Photoshop, GIMP, Paint.net, something like that, and then you can check where those different positions are. And that is pretty much the whole ordeal here. We're going to basically see another type of this in next tutorial, actually, when we talk about, also adding the stuff with the arrow. This is not going to be added in this tutorial. Right, so how do we fix the error right here? Well, for this, we have to go into the mod menu types class and actually do some more things. So once again, we'll need a public static final deferred register, this type of a menu type, and then here of type question mark. This is going to be the menus deferred register equal to deferred register.create forge registries.containers, interestingly enough, and then tutorial mod.mod ID. And there you go. And of course, once again, yes, exactly, we need a public static void register method with the iEvent bus, called event bus, and then we'll just do menus.register, passing in the event bus. And let's immediately call this as well below here, mod menu types.register, passing in the event bus, and there you go. And then, of course, we need two new things. Actually, we'll need a private static, and that's going to be pretty crazy, but don't worry about it. Open angle bracket T extends abstract container menu, close angle bracket, registry object of type menu type of type T, register menu type, and then passing in as parameters iContainer factory of type T, quote factory, comma, string parameter name, and there you go. Once again, this is all available to you in the GitHub repository and individual gist as well. This method will return menus.register, the name, and then a supplier of iForge menu type create, passing in the factory, and then you should have no more errors present. And what we can do then is we can make a public static final registry object of type menu type of type gem cutting station menu. This is the gem cutting station menu, which is equal to the register menu type method right here, calling gem cutting station : new, and then just the name gem underscore cutting underscore station underscore menu. There you go. And that should pretty much be all of the things that we're going to need here. In this case, let's do this, and there you go. And then what we can do right here in the menu type, we can just say mod menu types gemcuttingstation.get. And then this one is done as well. And then let's actually do the screen next, and let's finish this. So this screen is going to extends abstract container screen, very important, angled brackets gem cutting station menu, and then hover over this, implement methods, the render bg method, and then we'll hover over this, create constructor matching super. And then we're just going to need a few more things. So first of all, we need a resource location. You can see this just points to the actual GUI texture that we've added before, this one right here. We also want to add the render method like this. And then in the render BG, I will copy the contents over as well and quickly sort of, explain. The general idea here is that this is pretty much just some boilerplate code that is going to, draw this actual texture on the screen. That's pretty much all that that's happening here. This pretty much looks always the same, regardless of basically your custom screen. And then the screen is done as well. And what we have to do is in our tutorial mod class, in the client setup right here, what we want to do is we want to call menu screens.register mod menu types dot gem cutting station menu dot get, and then a gem cutting station screen : new. We should have no more errors present, and that should be it. If by any chance this is the first tutorial that you're watching of this series, make sure that your client setup is added like this to your constructor. Some people forget this, or they haven't watched the previous tutorials, so they don't have this. So keep that in mind. You have to add this as well to your constructor here, otherwise it's not going to work. Now, if that is the case, we can fix the last error as well right here in our create menu method right here. So what we can do there is basically just go in, and right here, we're just going to do new gem cutting station menu passing in the container ID, the inventory, and then this. And with that, no more errors should be present, and our custom block entity is added to Minecraft. As you've seen, it's quite the ordeal, but once you've done it once, you can probably just copy over a bunch of the classes, change all of the relevant things in there, and then continue along with the other things. Like I said, I highly recommend, if you have a bunch of different block entities, I highly suggest also checking out the next tutorial where we're going to do the custom recipe types, so you can basically make your own custom JSON files and then read in recipes like that. I highly recommend it because this way, while it does work, it is very crude and not necessarily recommended. But whatever the case may be, this is all of the things that we're going to need. So I guess let's see if it works. All right, we find ourselves back in Minecraft. So let's just set down the gem cutting station and let's right click, and there you go. The thing is implemented and added, and let's just add some of the stuff. Let's actually wait until I add the water bottle here. And well, I mean, you can clearly see that it is now working pretty much. If this is not working for you for the first time, don't worry about it. It is quite a lot. I mean, you can see the length of this video. There are a lot of things that you have to do. So I just highly recommend check all of the spelling again. Make sure that you've not made any mistakes. The gist and the GitHub repository should be, very good for this as well. So keep that in mind, and let's add the water, and then we should see a citrine be added here. The water should be deleted, as well as one raw citrine right here, and the gem cutting tool should take 1 damage. And exactly like that it happens, and there you go, and there you go as well. We should also be able to shift click with this. Now you can see that, we haven't restricted the access to this. Like, we can still put raw citrine in there. That's of course not quite what we want, but that is going to be fine. But then you can clearly see that this also should work. We can just add more water in here as well. There you go. And it all works totally fine. This is really cool. And I mean, you can see this is already really freaking awesome as a crafting thing, but I can tell you, I very much can tell you, once we have this with the JSON files as well and the progress here, it's going to be even more cooler and just even way better. If we destroy this as well, you can see it all drops, so everything working totally fine, and that's how easy it is to add a custom block entity to Minecraft. Right, but that would already be it for this tutorial right here. I hope you found this useful and you learned something new. If you did, I would very much appreciate a like, and don't forget to subscribe for more tutorials just like this one. I also want to thank all of my lovely Patreon supporters for supporting me and this channel. It is very much appreciated, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. So, yeah.